during the midst of a 4-12 season that has gone completely off the rails. They've got the interim head coach right now. The offense has sputtered since Thomas Brown has been elevated to head coach.
They've been a worse team since they fired Matt Eberflus, and that's not me trying to tell you that I regret them moving on from Matt Eberflus, but that's just reality. The defense disappeared prior to the Thursday night game against Seattle, and I don't know what to make of that game. I thought Seattle came in and told you what they thought of the Bears' front seven.
Yep.
A team that was averaging 35. Gino was averaging 35 passing attempts a game. They came out and they tried to run it down their throat, and they had decent success doing it.
Yeah, the Seahawks had been struggling to run the football. They were without Kenneth Walker Jr., Kenneth Walker III, my bad. And they were without him. They still fed Zach Charbonnet on that first drive. And it was an awful game. And
the offense, once again, is just, leaves you with, I gave you the numbers. Again, consume this. The offense ranks dead last in yards per game at 288. I think Carm said they're last in yards per play as well. Is that right, fellas?
It would line up.
29th in points per game. They average 18 points per game. 31st in third down conversions, and they're 32nd dead last in sacks allowed. This was the year offensively that we were expecting them to kind of take a step forward. So, and I don't think anybody can escape criticism. And I've been very vocal about how much I like the young quarterback, and I think he's got a ton of potential. And I'm optimistic that if they find the right guy and they find the right situation, that I'm not interested in redrafting. Right? Are you interested in redrafting at this point? I would say let's get to a couple years into this experience before we go back and look. There's no question Jaden Daniels has been a significantly better player, consistently better player than Caleb has been. I think that you are now starting to see some signs of the turmoil and the instability that has existed up there in his play. Mm-hmm. I think it's very difficult to be consistently good when everything around you is unstable. So instability breeds inconsistency, much in the same way that as you would understand, stability would breed consistency or good play consistently. It can't end fast enough for me at this point. But I have to tell you, too, for those that don't want to see Caleb Williams and other guys play on Sunday in Green Bay, I vehemently disagree with you folks.
Yeah,
respectfully.
And that's something that Thomas Brown talked about on Monday, almost immediately in his press conference. He was asked about whether or not whether there was any discussion given to whether or not Caleb Williams would play, and he shut that down immediately. Mark Potash actually was the one who asked the question about, since there's nothing to be gained in the standings here, did you give any consideration to putting him down? And this is, for those who missed it, because obviously it was holiday season the last week or so, Thomas Brown on Monday, when he was asked about Caleb Williams and other veterans potentially resting on Sunday.
With nothing at stake in the standings and with, Caleb possibly being in an offense that he won't be in next year, was there any consideration given by you or Ryan Poles or Kevin Warren to sitting Caleb this week?
Yeah, so we say nothing at stake. So there's a game that's going to be played. So it's stake as far as competing and winning a football game, which I think is different from maybe the outside world's perspective. There's always an opportunity at stake to go compete and be at your best. So I wouldn't agree with you as far as nothing at stake. Obviously, we're not going to the playoffs. I guess it's more of your thought process behind it. But as far as Caleb goes, as far as dialogue about him not playing, that's never come up or been talked about at all. Obviously, part of the overall evolution of him being his best to try to continue to find ways to help him continue to grow and be at his best week in and week out. And part of it is going to be able to learn to protect himself and also be better around him from a protection standpoint. But there was no thought into that for myself or communication with Ryan, because there's an opportunity that's not guaranteed. And I take it very seriously because opportunities aren't guaranteed. And one thing I hate more than anything is wasted time. Because when time is gone, you don't get it back. So I'm going to maximize every moment I have. And so to be the same thought process as far as this team and this game on Sunday.
So every healthy veteran's going to play.
Yes.
And rightfully so. You know what? I applaud everything that was just said there by Thomas Brown. Like, this team hasn't proven that they anybody deserves to take the final game off. In fact, I would suggest to you that all of you are still being evaluated. I think Caleb has played well enough. There are a ton of things he can still work on, even if he's playing in a different offense next year. How about better fundamentals? How about this is the second opportunity you're going to have to face the Green Bay Packers? Mm-hmm. How about you still need to get better at a lot of stuff? Practice getting the ball out quicker. Practice doing a ton of things. Like we always say in training camp, right, guys, that the only way to get better at football is to play football.
No doubt.
So I'm an advocate of them playing more in the preseason, and I'm an advocate of all of them playing now as well. Protect yourself with how you play the game. So
this is the hard part, though, in that, in all reality, Caleb Williams recognizes that Thomas Brown, most of this coaching staff, if not all of this coaching staff, will not be in place next season. So he needs to approach this game getting the most out of it.
Absolutely.
Trying to maximize, too, for himself, all the things that he's done poorly, and we'll play it in a little bit. You know, he talked about some of the issues that the Bears have had protecting him, and he took almost all of the responsibility. Now, we can quibble about what the...
That's being a touch too magnanimous for me.
No doubt.
He does have to assume some responsibility for the 60-plus sacks, but
I think if
the
nothing,
offensive line deserves a tremendous amount of scrutiny as well.
I think if nothing else, the opportunity to go play at Lambeau Field as the starting quarterback of the Chicago Bears, just to get your feet wet in that environment, will serve him well next season going forward when hopefully the Bears have things turned around in a direction where they can be a little bit more competitive. Playing against your rival on the road can be a valuable lesson that he can learn from. Right?
Let me ask you a question. Are you comfortable with his overall accuracy this year?
No. No,
well, that's something you can practice. Like, how about dropping back, setting your feet, having a good foundation, follow your right fundamentals, and delivering a pass on target? Like, you can practice that every time they call a pass play.
And the other thing too is there's an opportunity in some ways where it can be a little more freeing because he can go out there, Waddle, without a loss doesn't really matter either way for the Bears.
But I still want you. But I want you to play within the confines of the offense instead of going out there and just winging it and playing.
But that's what I'm getting at is he can be a little more dialed in and focused on. Let me work on the fundamentals to get better.
Yeah,
I don't need to be Superman in this game because the win won't matter ultimately. So let me try and work on things that will help me moving forward, to take this opportunity to use these reps. We talk about it all the time. There's just not any time for practice these days anymore in this NFL. It's been basically negotiated out through the CBA because the owners are more than happy to whittle away practices in exchange for more money for them and more games being played,
higher revenue,
more TV packages to sell. And in exchange, NFL players have less padded practices.
Look,
right?
I think I assume that this has been a very trying season for him as well as a ton of people, as well as a ton of people up at Hallis Hall. For him, he's never, the college season. This is a much longer stretch of time than the college season. I don't think he anticipated being sacked 60 times plus when he came into his first rookie year here in the National Football League. Some of that is on him, obviously. I don't think he anticipated having 2 offensive coordinators and 2 head coaches. I don't think he anticipated a lot of that stuff. So it has been a trying season that I'm sure in some ways he wants to see it come to an end and get a fresh start going into next year. But you still have one game left to go out there and work on some of the stuff you haven't been good enough at. And I would say that to everybody on this team. And I would tell you that whether or not you're going to have a new general manager in the building next year or they are going to move forward with Ryan Poles, my hope is that whoever's in charge of personnel, I mentioned this to you guys before the turn of the year, a week or so ago, I would come in, whether I'm Ryan Poles or I'm a new GM, with a glass half empty approach. I would be looking at this roster a whole lot differently than maybe I did several months ago. There would not be any rose-colored glasses on. I would be drilling down on what needs to change here. The good kid made a really good statement about Tremaine Edmonds. Look, you brought him in as a high-priced free agent. Last year, there was more production. This year, not so much. You can't move forward paying him $18 million just because he was your guy and you brought him in as a free agent and he's on your resume. If you think you need to move off from him, you've got to be able to pivot and move and don't worry about your resume. And you have to look at, Jeff, you have to look at it, the whole roster that way.
Yeah, I think what this season has proven is that there's no more benefits of the doubt being given to guys on this roster. And that's where I keep getting back to extending Ryan Poles seems like a ludicrous idea to me. I understand wanting to have your general manager and your new head coach on the same timeline, but the reality is the job that Ryan Poles...
At what cost?
Yeah, what has he done to proven that he should be given an additional contract? You know, the fact that we're talking about you having to come in next year and throwing the rose-colored glasses away and really looking hard at this roster and saying to yourself, all right, this is the problem with Ryan Poles coming back, is that he's got too much skin in the game with the guys on this current roster. And I think he's shown us...
Can you be objective?
I don't... Forget objective. I think he's shown us that he's more likely to believe his initial scouting report on guys and hope that what he saw when he was making those evaluations comes to fruition
rather than coaching.
Rather than recognize that what they've done on the field is more likely, what they are as players at this NFL level.
Well, that's why I'm saying, can you be objective about your own decisions, and can you be objective about those, whether or not those were good decisions? Can you pivot and move off of things or guys that you felt really highly about or really strongly about previously when you decided to trade for them or to draft them or to sign them as free agents? Again, I would be very leery to just suggest, and again, the coaching change needs to happen, but I'd be very leery about just deciding to go to the gate with virtually the same roster, thinking that a new staff is just going to get more out of them than the previous staff. I think the new staff would if you gave them this same group, but I'm just telling you, I don't think this group is good enough.
Yeah.
So don't be fooled by just bad coaching is the reason why you've lost 10 in a row and you sit at 4-12. There's a combination.
Yes.
Your roster's not good enough. Your coaching staff isn't good enough. And don't just hope or think that because you're going to bring in a new coaching staff that automatically everyone on the roster is going to become a much better player.
Which, to that point, is why I do think a clean break from Ryan Poles would serve this organization best. I don't think they have the appetite to do that, especially when you listen to the way Kevin Warren spoke glowingly about Ryan Poles on the Monday after Thanksgiving, after they fired Matt Eberflus. Now, was that just public posturing by Kevin Warren, knowing that he wasn't making that move that day? And so that is possible, right? And I think we'll learn a lot more on Monday, when Monday evening rolls around, if Ryan Poles is still officially the general manager of the Bears.
Where would your money go on that?
I expect him to be.
I do. I agree.
All the reports surrounding the Bears seem to be of the belief that Ryan Poles will be brought back as the general manager. And Adam Schefter was on with Silvy and Dion in this time slot on Monday, and Adam Schefter believed that Ryan Poles was returning. I don't believe you've heard this because you had the day off, but for those who missed it, Adam Schefter on the Waddle and Silvy show about Ryan Poles and his future with the Bears.
Obviously, people disappointed, but my expectation is that Ryan Poles is going to be there, that they have a young GM talent, and that he's going to be given time to continue to do what he does and grow into the job and build the roster that they want. I'm sure people aren't happy right now, but I don't see anything happening with him, and I do see him being back in Chicago. By the way, we say these things, and then something could happen, right? But I have not gotten any hint or indication that that's happening. Now, could something happen? Sure. I'm not expecting that, but just because I'm not expecting doesn't mean that something can happen, because there's always a surprise. But I've got no indication, hint, expectation that they're doing something with Ryan Poles. No.
So, that's partially reading the tea leaves, too. And I think Kevin Warren's public support of Ryan Poles really does, from that Monday press conference after Thanksgiving, plays into the idea that everybody thinks Ryan Poles will be back. I don't know if we know Kevin Warren well enough to say, okay, that was just posturing during season, or if that is Kevin Warren at his word, on that day. And we will find out again on Monday, Tuesday of next week. Does Kevin Warren truly believe in Ryan Poles as the general manager? But Adam Schefter talking about him being a young GM who they want to grow into the job, saying that carries a little bit of weight with me. And I do think that if the Bears have their choice, they definitely want to bring back Ryan Poles. But should they? I don't know how you can look at this roster year 3 when you gave Ryan Poles, you gave him, like, how many GMs, Waddle, in the NFL get the opportunity to completely tear down their roster in that first year and basically take it on the chin, no questions asked, so that you could build up the roster in the best way possible? Listen, I think that's the way a lot of people would love to approach it, but the reality is that's not what most GMs get. Ryan Poles had that opportunity to do it that way, and now 3 years later, when you've had the opportunity to build up this roster,
you're going to have the same record more than likely than you had the year you tore it down.
I mean,
and you can argue that
that's
there
not
has
a good
been,
look.
Yeah, like there has been very little progress. No, I agree with you. I think that it's been a miserable slog this year. It just has. The expectation level that we all shared was significantly higher than the reality. But as you've seen over the course of decades, they're big fans of continuity, and they're not, big advocates of change. So I don't know. Look, I fully expect them to remain status quo with the general manager also. The one thing that does kind of throw a wrench into it and adds a little intrigue is the fact that they did fire a coach in the middle of the season, something they'd never done. But my expectation on Monday is that they're going to move forward. And as a team, they're going to search for a new coach.
Let's try Eric, who's in Logan Square. Hey, Eric, you're on ESPN 1000 with Waddle and Meller in for Silvy.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I was just thinking about the way that Poles was so confident he took a punter in the 4th round because this was his team that was supposed to be the team to do something. He sucks. What has he done? He's done nothing that I could see to worth keeping him. Everything he's done has just made the team worse, even when it should have made it better. And you can't evaluate what you have when you have a bunch of unknowns. You don't know if the offensive coordinator is the problem, the head coach is the problem, the quarterback. You don't know what's the problem because you have no given commodity on the team.
I think a lot of what you say makes a ton of sense. I mean, I can't sit here, nor is it my job to sit here and defend the job that the general manager has done.
Yeah, listen, he's put the Bears roster in a spot where, if you're looking at it objectively, there's very little you can defend. The one thing they have going for them is when they had the number 1 overall pick in a draft that had a highly touted quarterback, they were able to land a guy who I think a lot of people believe can be the quarterback of this team for the next decade.
I said to you guys probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, shame on me. Shame on me. Because I vocalized it at the time. I knew that the best decision wasn't to move forward with Matt Eberflus and set it on the air for weeks.
Yep.
I knew that the offensive line wasn't good enough to protect a rookie quarterback, the first overall selection, and I said it on the air a number of times. I knew they didn't have enough pass rush on the other side of Montez Sweat. I didn't realize that Montez Sweat was only going to give you 5 sacks this year. He has played through some injuries, but the pass rush is not existent. And yet my dumbass continued to say 9 wins, possibly 10, and maybe they sneak into the postseason as a wild card team. Now, if I knew that this was the wrong coach behind a leaky offensive line and a defensive line that didn't have enough pass rush, why didn't you look at me and smack the crap out of me and say, how in the world is this team going to get to 9 or 10 wins with what you just described? But yet, you had them winning 12, so you're the wrong guy to ask to slap the crap out of me.
If it's shame on you, it's shame on me, far worse than the chastising that you deserve, because I was fully aboard the Caleb Williams train, and I thought that he was going to solve a lot of the issues on the offensive line. I thought he could get rid of the ball quicker. I thought he'd be able to dissect what he was seeing a little bit more clearly, and I thought that in itself might help this offensive line. But I was just way too much trust in Ryan Poles. I've learned my lesson at this point. Where they're at right now, it's not a good spot. So hopefully they can figure it out with this next head coaching hire. But I certainly don't believe that extending Ryan Poles needs to be part of that. But we shall see. It is going to be...
Hey, how about these Bears and Packers that meeting up on Sunday up in Lambeau? Are you interested in going to that game?
No. But we'll talk about it. 312-332-3776. I certainly don't want to go... No. Who is... Listen, it's the last game. It's one of 17. It's the final one. But, no, I'm going to be watching it just basically hoping and
When we
praying.
come back, can you break it down for me, though? Because I need to know
Sure.
whether or not the Packers are going to win this game.
Sure, we'll break it down. Is Malik Willis starting?
I don't know.
We'll talk about it. 312-332-3776. Talk about with you right here on your home of the Bears, ESPN Chicago.